One of the things that often happens if you're affected or your family is affected by an orphan disease is you feel very isolated. Very often you can't find even a doctor that's familiar with the disease that you have and has a therapeutic suggestion for you. And so one of the things that PRF has done is to put together support groups for many orphan pediatric retinal diseases, where families can talk to other families that have made it through this type of problem. We initially started off working with a disease called retinopathy of prematurity, and we're able to bring many families together to help support them as they go through the acute problems of a prematurely born child. We also have a very active board member that deals with what's called retinoschisis, or a congenital problem that splits the retina in half. We have many families with familial exudative vitreoretinopathy, another orphan disease, where we have the largest clinical group of those patients in the world. There's several other diseases also that we've been able to bring families together to try and support each other, because indeed it's a very frightening and scary thing, and you can't always rely on information that you get on the internet. You may need someone that actually has lived the experience to give you the advice that you really want.
So I first came to this group back in 2003, and both Doctors Tracy and Capone were already here and doing pediatric retinal work. And I recognized how world-class the quality of the work that they were doing for children was. Having a background in genetics and molecular biology, there was an immediate synergy because I could identify this untapped population of kids that nobody else in the world had access to, and I knew how we could turn this into something meaningful for getting them to have better outcomes, better treatments, better options. And I'm fortunate that I had two doctors who saw that vision and were excited by it. And I think we have a very strong core group that shares the same mission of making life better for kids that have blinding diseases.
Well, I started out in ophthalmology in 1986, working for actually Dr. Tracy's lab at Oakland University. And I came down to Beaumont for approximately 10 years and worked here full-time, and then now I'm back up at Oakland University doing eye research the whole time.
So we have this panel that we made just using our biochemical know-how to do these techniques. And so we could share it with other places, but right now we've developed it here. The genes we look at, this panel is just here. But a lot of the patients that we get samples from, they come here to Associated Retinal Consultants from around the United States. They're fairly rare diseases. And that's another problem too, is that if you have in medicine they call rare diseases orphan diseases. I think in the United States, in our population, if it affects only 10 to 15,000 people or less, they call that a rare disease, an orphan disease. Well, these diseases are very rare. And the one problem with rare diseases is it's hard to get attention for people to do research on rare diseases. Everybody does research on diabetic retinopathy because that blinds more Americans every year than anything else. But it's hard to get research focused on these rare diseases. But the solution for that is to take one place like our place and a clinic like this that happens to have a large amount of these families brought here for their expertise and examination, and then we have enough, just enough people and get enough funds together, and then if you get the right know-how, we've come up with this way to sequence them.
The lab was funded by funding from the Pediatric Retinal Research Foundation, which previously was called ROPARD, and it was funded by two very generous families that contributed in excess of $1.7 million to fund the lab. The lab was then designed by Dr. Frank Giblin, who was the head of the Eye Research Institute at that time, and myself, to be able to carry out both pharmaceutical studies, to use new surgical instruments with a surgical suite for animal ocular surgery, and an office space to carry out conference meetings with people around the world, even prior to the pandemic, when it seems like that's the only type of conference we can do. But it does a beautiful job. We've had many people tour it and comment that you could do pretty much any kind of research that you wanted there. And that's including the man that was the director of the National Eye Institute at that time. So it's become a very fine lab.
Once you have a track record of showing something works, it's also easier to keep it going. And then it's also nice to go back and say, hey, you know, fund more of this. This works now, let's do more people. Here it is, we can show you that it works. And all that stops us from doing more of it is to get the resources. And so anybody that can donate resources, they immediately have an impact, just because more people will be sequenced in a shorter amount of time, in our case. And so that's the benefit of donating to an organization like the PRRF.
What keeps me interested in it is that there's a possibility of being able to help the patients and being able to see children someday, hopefully, we'll come up with a therapy where they'll be able to see again.
Success when you're dealing with children that have potentially blinding diseases are highly variable. Sometimes the success can be as small as just stabilizing a situation and preventing it from progressing and getting worse, all the way to taking a blind eye and restoring vision to it. For me personally, the success is trying to find out what I can attain and making that happen for that individual. And obviously, based on my background, my biggest success that I am hoping will come to fruition is to be able to generate a drug and a therapy that is tailor-made just for these kids to prevent them from going down the pathway of chronic vision loss, which so many of them suffer from.